Welcome to St. Anselm College. My name is Neil Levesque. I'm the Executive Director here at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. I want to welcome you to the 6th Annual Innovate New Hampshire Summit, hosted by none other than Senator Maggie Hassan. Senator Hassan, of course, is our former governor. She's now serving her second term in the United States Senate. And today's forum allows business leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs to come together to collaborate and to find ways to make New Hampshire an even better place to do business. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Senator Hassan to the podium.
Well, thank you, Neil, for the introduction, for welcoming us all here this morning and making today possible, and for everything that you do with St. Anselm's Institute of Politics. To all of you who are here, welcome to this year's 6th Annual Innovate New Hampshire Forum. And thank you to our panelists and all of the business and community leaders who are joining us today. Before we begin with our panels, I want to take a few minutes to talk about our state's spirit of innovation in the context of what is truly a historic moment for New Hampshire's and our country's innovators and entrepreneurs. As all of you know, in New Hampshire, our innovators and entrepreneurs are the key to the state's success. Their creativity and determination allows a small state like ours to punch way above our weight. New Hampshire's builders and creators, people like the shipbuilders in Portsmouth who were pioneers in the field of submarine technology, or the researchers who today work in Manchester's biofabrication labs, have helped to ensure that our state has been and will always continue to be a leader in innovation. Today's forum is a great opportunity to bring together some of the best and brightest New Hampshire business and community leaders. This event not only gives us a chance to highlight your great work, but to learn from each other, forge stronger partnerships, and discuss how we can address our shared challenges. This year's forum comes during a historic and indeed extraordinary time for innovation. Thanks to the advocacy of entrepreneurs and business leaders all across the country, including Granite Staters, we were able to come together last year and enact the Bipartisan CHIPS and Science Act, which makes record investments in American research and manufacturing. This law sets the stage for a renaissance in American innovation and advanced manufacturing and will help our country be self-reliant when it comes to critical technologies like semiconductors, technologies that are vital for both our national security and our economy. Our investments will expand our economy and help stop our country from relying on other countries, including adversaries like China, for essential supplies and technologies. The CHIPS and Science Act's investments are comprehensive, aimed at all of the elements in the innovation ecosystem that are necessary to support expanded and enhanced manufacturing. For instance, this law promotes partnerships and job placement programs between colleges and manufacturers, expanding opportunity for more Americans to pursue careers in STEM fields. The CHIPS and Science Act also recognizes the importance of collaboration and investment in areas of the country that have a strong foundation in producing critical technologies, but that need help in scaling their efforts up in order to compete globally. This law identified the need for regional centers of excellence that could become leaders in next-generation technology development and help spread the benefits of technology and innovation throughout regions of the country where growth and prosperity have been uneven. These areas are designated in the CHIPS and Science Act as tech hubs, and they have business, local government, and academic communities together that have been identified as having the talent, vision, and resources to propel science and American competitiveness forward. Happily, New Hampshire has been recognized as one such place. We announced this development last month when I had the privilege of joining the congressional delegation, Dean Kamen, and other New Hampshire leaders in announcing that a new collaboration led by the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute, otherwise known as ARMI, and that it has been selected as one of the tech hubs following an extensive competitive process. So this tech hub in New Hampshire, this new multi-stakeholder effort will be known as Regen Valley. And because of its designation as a tech hub, it will be able to pursue millions in federal grants to grow our economy and help move our country forward. The scientists and innovators in this newly designated Regen Valley will continue to pioneer organ and tissue regeneration, which has the potential to be a game changer for treating injuries and chronic illnesses. These are exactly the kind of endeavors that the CHIPS and Science Act envisioned. So the CHIPS and Science Act is just one of the initiatives that makes this the most exciting time for American manufacturing and innovation since the start of the post-World War II era. Last year, the Inflation Reduction Act was also signed into law, which, among other measures, takes groundbreaking steps towards building a clean energy future. This law invests in American clean energy manufacturing and expands clean energy technology research, which will help strengthen our economy, create jobs, and reduce emissions by roughly 40% by 2030. The Inflation Reduction Act also includes important tax cuts to bolster home energy efficiency, enabling homeowners to reduce emissions and lower their long-term energy costs, and creating a stronger domestic market for critical clean energy products manufactured here at home. There is much more work to do, to be sure, but this law, which only got over the finish line thanks to the persistence of the people in New Hampshire and across the country, will help ensure that America can lead the way in clean energy, help meet this moment in the climate crisis, and help strengthen our economy. Both the CHIPS and Science Act and the Inflation Reduction Act will strengthen and revitalize American manufacturing, lower costs, and bolster our national security. I look forward to our panel discussions that will delve further into this historic time for American innovation. In our first panel, we will talk about the impact that the CHIPS and Science Act will have on manufacturing and what that means for New Hampshire's innovators. In our second panel discussion, we will have a conversation on one of the most urgent challenges facing New Hampshire businesses: how to build a stronger workforce. To help our businesses thrive and to make the most of the CHIPS and Science Act and Inflation Reduction Act, we'll need to continue to tackle workforce challenges head-on, and that means addressing issues like housing and child care availability. I know that we'll have a robust discussion today, and I thank all of the panelists again for joining us. It's fitting that we are discussing our New Hampshire spirit of innovation and discovery this week, just a few days after we marked the 56th anniversary of the launch of the uncrewed Apollo 4 mission. The Apollo 4 was the first successful test of the Saturn V, the rocket that would later take our astronauts to the moon. Even when undertaking the Apollo 4 mission, it was still not yet fully known if astronauts could safely walk on the surface of the moon and return. NASA and our country was simply hoping in the promise of things still not fully seen. Perhaps that optimism seems a little bit more distant now, a relic from a time where we dared to race across the sky to reach heights unknown. In today's era of technology, where the world's information can be accessed through a device in our hand, it's really easy to become almost accustomed to innovation. We've become a difficult people to impress. But we can never lose our capacity for imagination and wonder. Every day, Americans and Granite Staters continue to make extraordinary advances. Just as was true for our country in 1967, we don't fully know where these advances may lead. We don't know the full measure of what Regen Valley's biofabrication will mean for somebody who is diagnosed with cancer a generation from now. We cannot fully estimate what developments in clean energy technology enabled through the Inflation Reduction Act may yield in our attempts to fight climate change, nor can we confidently say in what other unforeseen ways new technology can be used to make a better world. But we do know that the next great discovery and the next one is out there. This spirit of discovery is not only a part of who we are as Granite Staters, it's an essential part of who we are as a democracy. It is through freedom, the freedom to create, to try, to fail, and to try again, that we're able to bring out the best in ourselves and in each other. As long as we live in the world's greatest democracy, as long as we call the live free or die state home, the potential of our people is limitless. And that's, as much as anything, what today and these innovation forums are about. So thank you, and we'll now turn to our panels. So good morning, everybody. So for our first panel, we're going to go more in depth about the impact that the CHIPS and Science Act can have for our state and our country. So before I begin with questions, I'd like to ask everybody just to go down the panel here and share your name and the organization or company that you represent. So Rebecca, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Callahan. I'm here from the Department of Commerce, where I am at the CHIPS for America program, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs.
Hi, my name is James Lee. I'm here on behalf of BAE Systems. I'm the Senior Director of Microelectronics at the company, and on behalf of the nearly 6,000 employees that work in New Hampshire, thank you, Senator, for the invitation to participate in this activity.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm Dave Beatson. I'm CEO of GPD Optoelectronics. We built something called a photodiode, which senses light at some of the most high-tech lasers and light sources. I see there's about 4 products in the room that have our equipment in it somewhere. Thank you, Senator Hansen, for having us today. Unlike James, we are a 65-person company, so we are the opposite end of the spectrum here in New Hampshire. I'm a recent transplant to New Hampshire, and I'm very thankful I came here. I love it here.
Good morning, Sidi Patari, Green Source Fabrication. We make high-end printed circuit boards primarily for defense applications. We go down to feature size about 20 microns, about the size of a red blood cell. So we offer a unique capability that not many in the U.S. can support. So thanks again, Senator, for having us here.
Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Tony Fernandez. I'm the president and CEO of the New Hampshire MEP. And unlike a lot of the participants here, I'm not a member of a company, but I'm a matchmaker. Basically, that's what we do at the MEP. And when we get through the panel, I'll explain a little bit more. But thank you, Senator Hassan.
You're welcome. And MEP is Manufacturing Extension Partnership. I spend my life awash in acronyms, so I'm always trying to make sure I've got my titles right. So let's just start with the discussion, and I'm just going to kick it off with a question to each of you, and then we can kind of see how our time is working and take it from there. Rebecca, I want to start with you. Could you give an update on where we are currently with implementation of the CHIPS and Science Act, especially as it relates to opportunities for small businesses in New Hampshire?
Absolutely. Well, first off, I wanted to say congrats. It's like incredible that New Hampshire has been awarded a tech hub, and it sounds like the Region Valley is going to be really an asset to the state and the country. So that's really amazing. And Senator, I wanted to kind of riff off something that you mentioned in your intro, which is about the Apollo mission and the space race, and that's actually one way that Secretary Raimondo at the Department of Commerce has framed the CHIPS Act and what we are trying to do with semiconductors and semiconductor manufacturing is we need to bring this whole of society approach that we had back for the moonshot and the space race, and that means bringing together manufacturers across many, many sectors and making sure that we are all able to participate and benefit from these investment efforts so that they're sustained. So in terms of implementation, we're just over a year since the bill has been signed into law. So we've stood up an office at the Department of Commerce. We're staffed up. We are receiving applications. We've received over 530 statements of interest from companies across the country. And over 120 pre and full applications, and those are currently going through the review process right now. We have released 2 notice of funding opportunities. So the first is for the really large scale, the big fabs, the packaging facilities, and large supply. So this is materials and chemicals and equipment that goes into the manufacturing process. And then we've also released a funding opportunity for smaller supply chain projects that are less than $300 million in capital expenditures. So those two big funding announcements are really the biggest chunk of our efforts, and we will be working on getting awards out as soon as possible, and we're hoping to make announcements regarding progress in this process later this year. So that's a little bit cagey, but you'll understand more soon, hopefully. And the effort is both on direct incentives to manufacturers, but also on research and development. And so the Department of Commerce has $11 billion to invest in 4 different programs to really build up the R&D capacity so we can, again, make this a really sustainable effort in the United States, and so that we have really the leadership to continue to push the boundaries and to create the most cutting edge technology here and manufacture it here. So we just recently announced, in fact last week, that the department has entered into an agreement to negotiate a contract with an entity that will manage the operations of the National Semiconductor Technology Center. This is a huge step in the entire endeavor, and really exciting to see what will come soon. So regarding your question about businesses and small businesses specifically, there's I think 3 different efforts that are worth mentioning here. The first is, like I said, a lot of the money is going to go to these really large operations because we do need to reshore really substantial leading edge and mature and current node semiconductor manufacturing capacity here. But there's going to be a whole lot of opportunities for smaller entities to help support these big investments, and happy to chat more about that as we go later. But just it's worth pointing out that we are requiring applicants of these large awards to document how they are going to work with small businesses to meet their overall needs. And this includes minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and we really take that seriously at the Department of Commerce of ensuring that it benefits many. It's also worth noting that we've created a teaming partner list so that small businesses who want to, who may not have a relationship with an existing, large manufacturer or an applicant to the CHIPS program, you can add your name and information about your entity to a list that we host at chips.gov, and this is a place where applicants can go and look for partners that they may not have and add those to their applications, and hopefully that will lead to some great collaborations there. And then finally, worth noting that our smaller supply chain notice of funding opportunity is really tailored to be a much more streamlined process. We recognize that it could be quite a heavy lift to put together applications for these large awards, so we really wanted to make it a doable process for folks. So I'll encourage you, if you are interested in applying for the CHIPS Act funding, please put in a statement of interest. This is really the way that we kick off the process, and the department can work with you and better understand your interests and what expansions or new projects you would want to do with the money. So yep, get that in early, and yeah, I think that's
Excellent. Thank you. Great overview. James, we know that semiconductors play an important role in our national security. Can you talk about some of the ways this technology is vital for our national defense and the benefits of making critical technologies like semiconductors right here in the United States?
Sure, thank you, Senator. BA is a large defense contractor that produces electronic warfare systems for our leading aircraft like the F-35 and the F-15. We also produce many of the space electronics that go into many civilian and DoD missions. We're a leading supplier of military GPS systems. But one of the things that's not as well known is that we're also a producer of many commercial infrastructure electronic systems. Right? For example, we build hydroelectric drives for buses. We also produce a large amount of avionics and engine controls for the civil air transport industry. We also do medical imaging for dental. And when you look at the cross-section of what BAE does, electronics plays a critical role. Right? If you look at all those industries, they're not only both for the national security, defense security, but also the economic security of the nation. So when you look at leading-edge microelectronics, they permeate through almost every aspect of our daily lives. So at BAE, we're very happy to participate with our partners at Commerce and the Department of Defense, as well as the fellow delegation, Senator, in advancing the CHIPS Act, to be able to bring a more geographically diverse supply chain to the United States. That's particularly important because we need that balance in order to make sure that the nation, as well as the global economy, thrives together. Right? So leave everyone with the thought that, when you look at microelectronics, just think about everything that you touch on a daily basis, everything that you drive, everything that protects the nation that flies or is in space. There's a key component in there that's sourced, most likely designed by an American company, but made offshore. So hopefully we can work with everyone to bring that manufacturing supply base back onshore and offer a little bit of balance to the supply chain.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, and it, I think it's something that we all became more acutely aware of during the pandemic, which was we couldn't get critical supplies, and wherever they're going to be manufactured is where they're going to be prioritized. This has been an exciting time for us to really be able to bring stuff home and be self-reliant. So thank you, and thank you for what BAE does. Dave Beatson, as someone who has decades of experience in the electronics industry and manufacturing, what would you outline as both some of the challenges of this current moment as well as the opportunities presented by these recent investments in American manufacturing?
Thank you, Senator Hansen. The fusion of photonics, which is what my company does with semiconductors, which is what most of the CHIPS Act is designed, which is the silicon-based world, is an interesting convergence happening today. You see that much of semiconductors, maybe you read about quantum computers going forward, they actually communicate at light speed, and they want to communicate with light only, no longer electricity flowing down lines. More to the point, here we are at GPD, a very small company in Salem, New Hampshire, being a critical component to something called a position sensing device, a laser photodetector that steers lasers. Where is that specifically used? Well, we're one of the leaders in the world, if not the leader in the world, in satellite optical communication. So here we are, a small company in New Hampshire, leading the world, okay? But in that sense, we're a small company because photonics is still relatively small to the large semiconductor guys, the NVIDIAs, the Intels, and such. So we look forward, although our interaction with the CHIPS Act people has been outstanding because we jumped on right away. We look forward to, as this gets to being able to support smaller, call it adjacent companies and adjacent markets to silicon. We have talked about this several times, but the involvement of several people in this, including Senator Hansen, all the New Hampshire delegation has been a tremendous support to us. We await to see the future, but I can tell you it is bright here in New Hampshire with the several companies I found that can even enable us even further right now. So we are an innovative small company, and we're looking to see that continue to be advanced through government, state, and local funding. Thank you.
Thank you. And when I hear stories like yours, I am reminded too that one of the reasons we focused on investing in semiconductors and other critical chip technology, but it was really just this sense that not only did the pandemic expose our supply chain woes, but we began to realize that other countries were making significant investments in these sectors, and we weren't. And that our capacity, I just got back from a bipartisan trip to China, and when you consider how they invest in this sector compared to how our government does, it really is time for us to be able to support this kind of innovation. So we appreciate your work, Dave, and we're looking forward to seeing all the partnerships and growth you guys can achieve. Steve, looking at the economy, in recent years, supply chain challenges and semiconductor shortages have led to a rise in costs for businesses and consumers alike. So it's not just the inconvenience, it's the cost. How does bringing semiconductor supply chains home help both businesses and consumers?
Thank you, thank you, Senator. I think, as we talk to our Tier 1 subcontractors, defense contractors, they really are in a bind because they can't find the capability they need, in the U.S. They've been relying on countries like Japan, European countries, and with all the development that's happened over the last decade or so, as these programs are adopted, they're finding that lead times that were once 16 weeks become 52, become 2 years, become, we'll get back to you. Don't call us, we'll call you. So they're really in a bind. And if you look at even Nashua, New Hampshire, at one time was a hub for our electronics. It no longer is. As that capability has shifted to Asia, mostly consumer electronics. Not only has left the capability, but also the workforce. So we're seeing a big gap in the workforce. So bringing manufacturing back allows us to bring some capability back, but the challenge is we need to bring back at scale, right? So how do we ramp up? How do we not only invest in the needed capital, but how do we develop the workforce that's going to be required to do it and do it pretty quickly? So bringing manufacturing back is also going to help the supply chain because it gives our Tier 1s a secure supply chain domestically because there are restrictions on where they can get products. So it's critical that we have a saying in our industry, chips don't float. So you can do chip manufacturing, but if you don't have substrates and you don't have circuit boards to put them on, you're still going to have to go back.
Yeah.
So we have to develop the whole supply chain.
Great, thank you. Tony, the opportunities presented by the CHIPS and Science Act can be overwhelming for small but advanced manufacturers in New Hampshire. How has the New Hampshire Manufacturing Extension Partnership been working with New Hampshire businesses in the microelectronics industry to capitalize on the CHIPS Act opportunities and also kind of capitalize on the industry momentum?
Good morning, everybody. First off, manufacturing is a process, and one of the things that we all have to understand in the manufacturing sector is that the supply chain is manufacturing. And what we here at the MEP do is basically we are here to work with the manufacturers throughout the state. Both Dave and Steve had talked about the supply chain and the problems that they've had over the years. If you go back probably 45 years or so, or close to 50 years, the manufacturing sector in the United States was bright and rosy. What had happened is the supply chain started to break down around the 80s and the 90s, and most of the products moved overseas. What the CHIPS Act has done is it's given us the availability to reshore and remanufacture and really sustain manufacturing back here in the United States. So what the MEP, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, does is basically our responsibility or our mission is to take these companies now and to, for lack of a better word, package them into a product that we can develop and work within the CHIPS Act. So just before the discussion started, it was interesting. Dave was here. He met another gentleman, a manufacturer in the audience, and they talked about a similar product. That's what we're doing here at the MEP. Our mission, again, as I said, is to find small, medium manufacturers throughout the state who have processes that need to be developed. So in the case of supply chain or the value chain, the one thing people have to understand is you don't just manufacture. There's certain components and certain things that have to work. So if we look in the state of New Hampshire, for example, if you're going to be in the chips world, you have glove box manufacturers that we're going to need. There's a real big shortage of glove box manufacturers. We found a couple of them. We're going to hopefully be able to work and expand that. There are cooling manufacturers for the chips. I never really realized the amount of cooling that you need in the processing centers. Small little manufacturers that are out there. There's, like Steve, circuit board manufacturers. So what we're going to try to do in the next couple of months or so within the help of the Commerce Department is either develop consortiums or collaborations that we can effectively package the product and develop a spending package that will allow us. The problem that we have is here in New Hampshire, we have a lot of small manufacturers. And according to the regulations and the rules that are set out from the CHIPS Act, there's a high bar. A lot of, a company like Dave, for example, has a lot of potential, but they don't have the spending power or the ability to reach the thresholds. So what we're going to do is, I see John Roth is in the back here. We're going to hopefully work with the University of New Hampshire to develop a consortium where we can package these companies, put them together, and work within the frame. Now, the one thing I'll just end with, it's not only manufacturing. The CHIPS Act is a manufacturing act, but it's also developed with two parts that we have to talk about. We're going to talk about later on the housing and the social aspect. So there are things that we're going to have to, from the MEP standpoint, things that we as manufacturers who are not on top of our game when it comes to the housing market and to the social services, we're going to have to get those people, and to be honest with you, those are probably the biggest part from an economic standpoint and a dollar value. To build a building, for workforce development, it's a percentage. But really the biggest percentage that we're going to have here in the state of New Hampshire is we're going to have to develop housing, and we're going to have to develop the social structure.
Yeah, and I appreciate those comments very much as well. You know, I'm always, one of the things that really allows New Hampshire to, as I said, punch above its weight is we are good at partnerships and informal collaborations. And so I'm looking forward to working with all of you, but also with Commerce to make sure that as those collaborations grow, we can figure out a way to help small companies really take advantage of the Act. But I did want to turn to you, Rebecca, with a kind of follow-up question, and it follows well on what we were just talking about. What are some ways that the CHIPS and Science Act can help New Hampshire businesses, even if they aren't applying for funds? And how does the law also support K through 12 and higher education STEM learning, for instance? Because, again, on the workforce front, we need workforce that not only is trained up in our education system, but workforce that can continue to train and learn while they're working.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's really great. And I just want to reiterate what Tony said about MEP. I mean, this is such an invaluable resource, and making those connections and the partnerships are really essential to making this all succeed, both in terms of applications for CHIPS money, but overall in terms of making this succeed. None of it can be done in isolation, right? So one data point that stands out is that large semiconductor fabs have thousands of suppliers. So I think one way that companies may be able to take advantage of these like growth and opportunities is hopefully feeding into those systems. And the investments that are made by the CHIPS Act hopefully will have ripple effects throughout various other sectors. In terms of supply chain, one of the things that the Department of Commerce and the CHIPS office have done is really looking at how do we mitigate some of the risks. What are the risks to this failing or succeeding, right? And some of that is absolutely about supply chain and workforce. Right. Those are two of the biggest things that we are really looking at and making sure that we are making strategic investments in. So we're asking applicants, like I mentioned, to put together, their supply chain plans, but we're also asking them, and some of this is based in statute, how are they going to meet their workforce needs? And so we're asking them to partner with local education institutions and workforce trainers and making sure that they have a documented plan that meets the need for, there are going to be hundreds of thousands of jobs created, and we need to make sure that those jobs are filled. And of course, that also gets at the very important K through 12 education piece. We need more engineers. I think the estimate that I heard was we need 3 times more graduates at the undergraduate level with degrees that support the semiconductor field, so engineering, math, computer science. That's a huge increase. So that really means that we need to have investments in the K through 12 so that those students are set up for success. Right. So there's a couple pieces I guess I'll mention. So one is that the National Science Foundation also has some money that came from the CHIPS and Science Act, and they are specifically also working on how do we meet this semiconductor workforce need. And so the Department of Commerce is working closely, of course, with NSF, but also we have the National Semiconductor Technology Center, which is underway, getting stood up, but one of the three major thrusts there is to address that workforce and to look how we can be a convener of bringing together educational entities, industry, and labor workforce across the board, and make sure that we're really leveraging best practices and trying out new ways of training students and making sure that there's new models that make it more efficient and beneficial for all.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to give you two resources that are New Hampshire-based to check in with. General Michaelides, our Adjutant General for the New Hampshire National Guard, has been spearheading a program with fifth graders to help on STEM skills generally. So checking in on a National Guard team like ours and what they're doing might be good. And also, we have great engineering schools at UNH and at Dartmouth. Dartmouth has done some really critical work on bringing more women in to engineering, so they'd be a really good partner to talk to. There's a whole collaboration now of research universities that are led by women presidents and women deans of engineering, which is true at Dartmouth now, and they are really trying to focus on how to bring more women into the field, because when you leave so many talented people out of the engineering field and so many women don't pursue it for a variety of societal reasons, you're really leaving a lot of talent, right, on the field, and we really need to, or off the field, I guess I should say. So just a couple of suggestions as you guys pursue this and as NSF pursues it.
Yes, thank you.
So here's a question for the whole panel. It's really just to ask you to, if you want to expand on some of the residual benefits of the government's investment in semiconductor manufacturing, even for businesses not directly involved in their production. So you all have touched on this a little bit, but if anybody wants to expand on that, I think it would be helpful. Yeah, James?
Yeah, if you look at the Chips and Science Act and what happened with the microelectronic supply chain shortage, even though it was a forcing function, it drove us to look at a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
In the area of manufacturing and workforce development, we found we don't have the right kind of skills and talent, as Rebecca was saying, right? So it's forced us to take a greater look at how we can involve more people in the workforce. Programs like BAE's Microelectronics Boot Camp in cooperation with the Nashua Community College, right? Trying to open up a whole new avenue for people to get retrained and enter the semiconductor and the electronics workforce. Or you look at our activity with FIRST Robotics, right? Trying to get more of the K through 12 population interested in it. And by doing that, I mean, they don't have to go into semiconductors, right? They can go into many other industries. It's that interest and the ability to expose the workforce to those opportunities. They could include the biopharma industry. If you look at a lot of the skills that we have to train our employees that work in the clean room, right? They're directly applicable to the biopharma industry. You look at a lot of the effort in terms of semiconductors. One probably that's not talked about as much as the energy economy. You look at the impact of how it could impact solar energy or the overall electrification, smart grid. That's all powered by semiconductors, right? So those are additional industries that aren't necessarily associated with cell phones, computers, and things like that, but are a critical part of our national infrastructure. And we can be pioneers for that. And this is an opportunity to really drive some of those industries as well.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think it supports the whole infrastructure. I mean, Tony talked about cooling. We have printed circuit boards. It also provides opportunity and careers for people in technology. So our ability to partner with, John's here from UNH, to partner with universities and provide a future for young engineers and young people is also a residual effect.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
It also challenges the school systems too. And what we're finding here is that it's no longer the high schools, we're actually going down to the grade school and the middle schools. The thought process of every child should go to college has changed over the past 5 or 10 years, especially with the advancements that are happening in the manufacturing industry. The ability for a 14 or 15-year-old to work within the STEM education to get a skilled trade, whether it be a plumber or an electrician, and to work into manufacturing CNC. A lot of what we do in workforce development, we're doing tabletop training for the underserved, as well as individuals who would just like to get into the manufacturing. And one of the key things, manufacturing is two things that I keep on impressing. Manufacturing is no longer the dirty, shops that you had 20, 25 years ago. If you go in any of these gentlemen's shops, you could basically eat off the floor. That's the first thing. And the second thing that you would have in the manufacturing sector now is the wages. You no longer are scraping minimum wages. I was at a machine shop a couple of weeks ago, and it floored me that most of the people who were working, whether it be in the CNC operation or some of the cutting machines, lathes and things like that, come up with a salary of about $80,000 a year. And these are high school education or educated people. So from the standpoint of the change that they always say is one door closes, another one opens, it's opened a lot for the middle class.
I'd also like to, Senator, I think you came to visit us. I think
Yeah.
we'll say, talking about female engineers, we have no trouble getting female engineers. In fact, the majority of our engineers are female. Our two engineering supervisors are female. It's not something we try to do on purpose, but once we hire the first few and we send them to recruit, guess what they recruit? Guess what they attract? They attract other female engineers. So we've been pretty successful in that. And then we actually see a higher participation.
Great.
I don't know exactly what the numbers
Yeah.
are, but we do see quite a number of females in engineering.
Well, and it's one of the things that New Hampshire has really, its education system has piloted is in several school districts, competency-based education, really giving people the chance to do things hands-on. And when people learn they're good at something in whatever way they can learn, some people are going to learn book learning first and be really good at math and physics in the abstract, and other people need to really try things with their hands and try to have a different goal, a different way to reach the goals. So we need to keep that up. There's also a growing movement in Congress with bipartisan support that would allow Pell Grants to be used not just for four-year college, but for apprenticeship, qualified, strong, high-quality apprenticeship programs. And a lot of us think that that could be a major step forward in helping people afford that kind of training. Did you want
As
to
I
say
look
anything?
back in the 70s, not quite that old in the 70s, but I started in the 80s in the semiconductor business, there was a mature playbook that lasted decades. So groups of people, early adopters, got involved and lasted decades, which enabled innovation across the board at all the layers that needed to happen, which enabled thousands of different companies to be in the supply chain as this matured. The semiconductor industry and those aligned to it, PC boards, resistors, capacitors, 3 years ago passed the 1 trillion devices per year. 1 trillion devices per year. There is no scale business on earth that even comes close to competing to that in terms of volume or scale. So the maturity of that, the playbook they created really enabled miniaturization, obviously, but material science just rocketed forward on their backs. Supply chain management became a real topic. I mean, you can get a very significant degree in many major universities in supply chain management. It is not easy to manage this global economy. And then obviously, probably one of the keys was automation. And that's what I'll touch on here is, as the regenerative valley becomes important. These are not human scale problems. These are machine scale problems that we're going to have to fix. I see it in my business, but certainly the med device people that build medical devices saw it 10, 15 years ago and started adopting the semiconductor processes as much as they could. I'm sure the regen processes that we're talking about here are going to be able to do the same thing. So I look forward to really helping that effort here in New Hampshire.
Well, thank you. And one other note I would just make is, in addition to our school systems, some of which have really led the way on competency-based education, we've obviously also the home to Southern New Hampshire University, which is really a leader in helping people who are already working get that next set of skills so that they can work and learn at the same time, or earn and learn at the same time. So we've got a lot of good, strong educators in the state with good ideas and examples of how we can scale up this kind of education. Did you want to say anything else?
Well, I guess I love the idea of talking about the ripple effects of
Yeah.
this. And so there
Yeah.
were just two other things. I think I absolutely appreciate everything that was already said. But one thing that comes to mind is really the innovation piece of by having leading edge semiconductor and microelectronics research happening here, we can really enable more advances in like for the Region Valley and other innovators in New Hampshire. And that the piece about workforce training can't be emphasized enough. One data point that stands out to me that is really positive is since the CHIPS and Science Act was signed into law, after that, it was obviously a major indicator that this was going to be a growing field. There have been more than 50 community college programs stood up around the country specifically looking to serve that, to train technicians and engineers for the manufacturing jobs.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, before we close, this is a question, again, open to anybody. Anybody have anything to add on how New Hampshire entrepreneurs and businesses can make the most of both the CHIPS and Science Act and the Inflation Reduction Act? Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
The panel to my right could talk a little bit more about innovation, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about is I see some people here from the SBA and the SBDC. And when we talk about entrepreneurship, what's near and dear to my heart in manufacturing, most manufacturing companies, most innovations start with the small shop, the person who works in their basement, the person who works in their garage, and develops and works from there. One of the things that we have here in the state, as well as part in the federal government, is the availability of the SBA, the SBDC, and SCORE. So from an innovation standpoint, I myself used to be a chairman for SCORE. SCORE is probably the lowest arm of the SBA, but it's a free service that is permeates throughout the country. It's basically the thought process years ago was retired executives, but what we have right now is it's a collaboration of people who give back to the community. And if you just kind of layer from that, so the mentoring aspect of understanding, so a person like Dave could work with young entrepreneurs. Steve could work with young entrepreneurs in a one-on-one. And then you work up into the SBDC. The SBDC is the second arm that will have the availability for financing, education. And again, from that aspect, it's all free. So when I look at it from the aspect of entrepreneurship, it's a resource that we have out there that is so valuable that people don't know about. And the last thing that I want to say is that the SCORE aspect or understanding that entrepreneurship is so important to get involved into the community. We at MEP over the past 2 or 3 months, I've been able to attend some of the SCORE meetings. Invest in with the SBDC and the SBA, and I've got, I think, 4 companies right now who are interested in moving from different states here to New Hampshire, and we also have a couple of people who are machinists and some people who are on the innovative standpoint who we're trying to hook up with whether mentors or from the SBDC to work and to innovate and to develop a company.
That's great. Anybody else want to add anything?
I'll have a
Okay, yeah,
go at it.
yeah.
So one of the things that I think that's great about the current situation is that it's brought a lot of attention to the problems, and it's the government through the CHIPS Act and other initiatives has really tried to bring people together in new ways because that's how we're going to come up with new solutions. We can't just do things the way we were already doing in the past, right? We need new solutions, and bringing those people together is how we do that. So I would encourage any small business, there probably is a way to participate. I wouldn't necessarily discount it as like, oh, that's just for big companies kind of thing, right? So I would go to like chips.gov, right, and get to know what's a part of the legislation, what's available as a resource there, as well as the state, economic development sites, websites. BA, for its part, will try to get out as much as possible. We're economically incentivized to work with small businesses usually. So we're always trying to find new ideas and new suppliers, especially in the regional area, because we understand that working with regional parties, it brings a certain level of collaboration you don't necessarily get if you have to fly across the country, right? So we'd encourage the small businesses to do the same. I know it's easy as a big company to ask small companies to do that, but I think New Hampshire has a unique ecosystem that allows smaller companies to come together. So we'll try to do our part to get to those events so that you have someone to talk to, but please participate as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And one of our panelists in the next panel is from the SBDC too, so we will be focusing on some of the tangibles here. But anybody else want to add anything before we close out? Yeah. go ahead.
Yeah, as a recent transplant and trying to get one of the best kept secrets in New Hampshire is word out there, I turned to people like Tony and MEP and Natick and others, and they have really succeeded. I mean, I've gotten the Bagshaw group over here, and I'll put a shout out to them. They came and visited from the MEP event you had. We met there. And here they are, and this is a real-world story. We were sourcing parts from Taiwan. They gave us a quote. They're very competitive. So, this can be done.
There they are.
This can be done. We can reshore this to the United States. He's got great automation there and a great team, and we look forward to growing with companies like that in New Hampshire on a regional basis. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate not only I appreciate your participation this morning because I have some sense of how busy you all are too, but I also just appreciate your perspective, the organizations and businesses you lead, and the difference you make. So thank you for being here this morning. We're going to move on to the second panel in about 10 minutes so that everybody can take a break. Feel free to continue the conversation one-on-one, and we'll see you back, should we say what, Bobby, 5 after? Yeah, 5 after 10. Well, thanks, everybody. I really enjoyed the first panel. I hope you did too. And now we have a second panel. And I want to thank you all, first of all, for being here and for the work you do. But what we wanted to do in this panel was really tackle an issue that I know is on the minds of business owners all across the state. We touched on it in the first panel, but how do we build a stronger workforce for New Hampshire? We've got all this energy and investment in advanced manufacturing, advanced technology, and lots of opportunity, but we need a workforce. So I have questions for each of you, but before we get to that, why don't we just go down the row here, starting with you. Just introduce yourself and the organization you represent, and then we'll have a conversation.
Sounds excellent. Thank you, Senator, and honored to be here today. I'm Jen McDonald, the Chief Operating Officer of the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute, or ARMI, which is a little bit easier to say. ARMI is a nonprofit public-private partnership founded to advance the U.S. bioeconomy and really propel the U.S. to global preeminence in biofabrication. And we are working with a broad coalition of partners here in New Hampshire and across the nation to really build the foundation of a new American industry in biofabrication right here at home.
Sean Mulholland, City Manager for the City of Lebanon.
Sharon Kopp. I currently work for Lancaster Realty Holdings, which is the sister company to Pack Solutions, which is the manufacturing company of plastic bags in Lancaster, New Hampshire. I work for the realty portion because what they had realized was we had a big problem trying to retain individuals, and there was no housing available. So Pack Solutions decided that we really needed to take on some projects to allow for our skilled workers that we were bringing up from different locations, residents. And that's how it came about.
Good morning, I'm John Shaughnessy. I'm one of the owner partners of Pack Solutions, and we'd be lost without Sharon, it goes without saying. But we are a manufacturer of flexible packaging products, largely for the financial services, tamper-evident, as well as the food and medical industries across the country. We are based up in Lancaster. For those of you that have visited the North Country know some of the unique challenges we have in attracting and retaining talent, especially skilled workers up in the North Country. So I am excited to be part of the panel today. Also, the first part, I thought, Senator, thank you for hosting that. It's really impressive, and to think about some of the energy that's being created here in New Hampshire. I'm also the chair of the board of the Tilton School. And so as I think about preparing future students, future leaders for a world of diversity and change, I'm really excited about being in New Hampshire at this time.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Good morning. I'm Christine Bierce, and I'm with Excel. And we're well known for our navigation equipment for up from space, land to subsea, working in harsh environments. But most recently, we've now have a autonomous surface vehicle, so we deal a lot with robotics, which is really becoming important now to both the warfighter and for commercial operations. And we have 2 U.S. corporations here in the U.S., small, but we're basically a company based out of France. And the reason we're here today is because we're collaborating with UNH on a really exciting cutting-edge program, working with the students and the faculty there. Thanks.
And I'm Ed Miles. I am the Seacoast Regional Director for the New Hampshire Small Business Development Center. That's the SBDC. We are funded, we're an outreach service of the University of New Hampshire, but we're funded jointly primarily by the Office of Business and Economic Affairs, the BEA, with the state of New Hampshire, and the SBA, Small Business Administration. It's where we get our federal dollars.
Great, thanks for being here. Jen, I'm going to start with a question for you. But before I get to the question, you talked about Army and biofabrication. Will you just describe for folks what biofabrication means? Because I think it's kind of an abstract term, and I get excited thinking about the difference it would make for human beings. So just talk a little bit about what biofabrication is.
Absolutely. And I'll start with the premise, the issue that we're trying to solve. We are in a moment in this country where 6 in 10 Americans live with at least 1 chronic illness, 4 in 10 live with at least 2, and healthcare, primarily driven by chronic illness, is about 18% of our GDP. And that is a strain on our health, economic, and national security. And we are aiming to solve that. What biofabrication is the manufacture of curative and restorative regenerative medicine therapies. Regenerative medicine therapies and the concept that drives those has been around actually for a couple of decades. But what's been missing, and why we talk about biofabrication inclusive of manufacturing, is what's been missing is that manufacturing piece, the engineering, the robotics, the automation that make these regenerative medicine therapies reproducible, reliable, high quality, scalable, affordable, and able to be distributed to the broad range of people who will need them. That's the foundation of an industry, and that's what we're aiming to build.
Well, thank you. So just think about the possibility of somebody with kidney disease who is on dialysis and maybe waiting for a kidney transplant, instead being able to get a fabricated kidney right away and being off dialysis and really without chronic disease anymore. That's the kind of difference that we're talking about. And I always just like to get people to think about that in that way, because that's the power of innovation. All of the people here innovate in different ways. All of the companies we had in the first panel do too. And this is really the next generation of medicine happening right here in Manchester. So with that, what I wanted to follow up with you about is really the workforce challenges you're facing. Because as Jen was describing what Army is and what biofabrication is, I was thinking, like, who knows how to do that, right? And so you've got the workforce challenge that many New Hampshire businesses are facing. It's not simply having workers, but it's having people with the education and skills you need to compete in the 21st century economy, engage in something like biofabrication. So how is Army working with partners across New Hampshire to build the workforce that you need?
Yes, exactly, Senator. We need for this industry the skilled, capable workforce to help the companies that are looking to grow here, to start new lines of business here, thrive. We have companies working with us who are manufacturing what we believe will be curative therapies for type 1 diabetes, for renal disease, as you mentioned, Senator, for cardiac disease. And they're looking to grow a workforce, grow their manufacturing, and really grow the industry right here. Those are not just startups, but those are also multinational corporations looking looking to open a U.S. line of business, looking to found right here in New Hampshire. And we have to have that skilled talent to be able to support them. And given the nascency of this industry, and the nature of the technologies we work with, which as soon as you can get someone trained, the technology itself has evolved. Right. That means we must have the curriculum be industry informed, and that means we must have a pipeline of talent. So thanks to the coalition of partners we work with, we are engaged in high schools across New Hampshire. We're bridging into middle schools. We're engaged with the community college system of New Hampshire and the thriving university system here, which is a necessary core of pathways into this industry. And we think that pipeline, industry informed, is incredibly important.
Great, thank you. Sean Mulholland, who is the city manager from the City of Lebanon. Employers frequently tell me that childcare access and affordability hinders their efforts to recruit and retain employees. Can you talk about what Lebanon is doing with its community partners to address this issue in the Upper Valley?
We've taken a multi-pronged approach in partnering with our nonprofits and our business sector to deal with this particular issue. As you indicated, housing, childcare, and development of human capital are the three primary issues that we face and we have to address, and local governments have a responsibility in that. What we are doing is we are in the process of building a childcare facility that will house about 200 students, 200 kids, to meet about 9 or 10% of the need of the entire Upper Valley of New Hampshire. That is critically important to our biotech and medtech businesses because that's our hub in our particular area. 51% of those slots will be low to moderate income students, and then the other remaining spots will be open to the general market. This is a critical role of the municipality. We are going to build this facility in the middle of an industrial park that the city just built. We will build it, we will own the building, and then we will partner with the nonprofit, the Boys and Girls Club of Central New Hampshire, to run that facility. We're in the process of a capital campaign right now to be able to do that and to build that facility. There is a huge need in the Upper Valley, as there is throughout the entire country. We are short 2,000 child care slots in the Upper Valley, and that was before COVID. We suspect there are more now because many child care centers have closed down, while others are not operating at full capacity because they don't have the staff to do that. So we have a critical role to play in this process, and we are going to help solve this particular issue in the Upper Valley.
Well, thank you. And I think that really just speaks to the understanding that in order to have a strong economy and to have a good foundation for businesses, there needs to be a strong partnership with local government and with the state. And I really appreciate the innovation there and look forward to getting new reports about how it's going and also if we can be helpful. Sharon and John, let's talk about housing a little bit. It has also posed a serious challenge. I would say wherever I go in New Hampshire, business people say to me, you know, I've got this great capacity, I've got this great idea, there's great demand for my product. I can't find workers, or if I can find them, it's either childcare or housing or both that is really standing in the way. And obviously, as you mentioned, in the North Country, there's a particular challenge. Can you guys discuss how PAC Solutions has worked to address housing challenges and keep employees in your community and recruit employees to your community?
Sure. I'm happy to kick it off, and then I'll turn it over to the expert. Senator, thank you for the question. For us, it's been so we're a business that was, are a turnaround business. We bought our business in 2017 from an Indonesian conglomerate that had mismanaged the business and had driven down employment to about 20 employees. And here we are today, 2023, we're up to about 90 employees up in at PAC Solutions today, so I'm very proud of that. Proud of the fact that we were able to offer competitive wages and real great opportunities for some of our employees up in the North Country. But it became pretty clear to us also a couple different things were happening. One, for our skilled workforce, so print press operators, converting machine operators, we're a manufacturer of, as Sharon mentioned, we manufacture flexible packaging for food industry, medical industry, and financial services, and we require a mix of diverse talent. And we found that up in the North Country, we were looking elsewhere to find that talent, to bring it up north. So we were reaching into Massachusetts, trying to entice people to come up and operate our machines. We've invested over $15 million in the business in the last several years. And so in order to bring people up and pay them a competitive Massachusetts-related wage, we also had to get creative around things like housing. And it's, some of you may not realize, but there might be a misperception that in the North Country, things are cheaper. It's not that cheap in the North Country. I can promise you that. And so for us, our ability to look at creative ways to put together competitive packages to attract talent has included now offering housing to many of our workers who are in need. Many of you know that the Invest NH program that was made available to businesses like PAC, unfortunately, we were not selected. And I think we're an example of maybe a business that if there is a lesson to learn, some folks mentioned earlier about thresholds and certain thresholds to be able to access government funding, which is critical in certain parts of the state. And we're a business at 90 employees that didn't necessarily maybe meet some of the thresholds. Yeah. And so our applications and some of our efforts to try to secure some of that financing were overlooked. We'd love a second bite at that apple at some point, Senator. But nonetheless, so we've taken upon ourselves to privately finance an awful lot of the efforts that are underway. So if you, any of you that have driven into Lancaster, you come over the bridge, we've purchased pretty much all of the downtown in Lancaster. And we're in the, right now we're redeveloping it. As Sharon mentioned, we started a real estate arm of our organization. Sharon is our managing director of our real estate arm. So we've redeveloped an awful lot of the properties in downtown right now, where we've put some retail and some commercial businesses in the first floors, and we've redeveloped the upstairs, and we're putting apartments, and we're housing employees now in many of those. Some of the issue, though, for us is as we emerged from, the turnaround in 2017, and then like a lot of you in this room, the business was impacted by COVID, for sure. Another challenge that was a little unforeseen, but we all weathered the storm, and we were able to move and grow through it. And then inflation hit. And so the cost of construction and the cost of the renovations and the cost of financing a lot of those projects for us has become a lot more expensive. So the opportunity to afford market-based rents versus affordable rents has become a bigger challenge for us. And so these are all some of the issues that I think businesses like us are facing, and many of you are in the same boat. We continue to see the benefits of maintaining the program that we have in place. We've got a much more stable workforce. I would say it's not entirely stable, like a lot of us in this room. We're still challenged, and I'd put a plug in also not just for affordable housing, but for behavioral health, mental health, and substance abuse services. Yeah. The idea of supportive housing is something that we're talking an awful lot about in our business. Being able to supply wraparound services for some of our workers who are challenged. There's a lot of issues to maintain a stable workforce, especially in the North Country, and we are a second chance employer. Yep. And so we take that seriously. So for us, it's a business decision that we made to invest. We can't operate our machines if we don't have people to help run them, right? So we know that there's an economic imperative for us to do this. And so, that's what those are some of the strategies we've employed.
Great, so. Thank you. Sharon.
With that, the partners have purchased 3 Main Street properties, like John had said, and rehabbed them. And right now we have on Main Street, we have 6 apartments that are done, 2 that will be done by January 1st, 8 more by the end of next year will be done. We also have 2 condos. One, we're also purchasing another condo, and then we have a single home and a multifamily home. And we don't just house our own employees. So I'm also part of the hospital board, and there was also a need for doctors and nurses and our traveling professionals. So we have a couple of doctors. We also have the local custodian for the middle school. We have some medical administration in there. So we just don't limit it to our own employees. There's a need across the board up in Lancaster, like everywhere else. And the partners have seen that need and have been very progressive in providing for really the community up there. Because once you bring that community in, then you may have more workers for your own manufacturing portion.
Yeah. And I'll add, first of all, I've actually seen some of the apartments. They're great, and one of the things that really impressed me when I was up there this summer is just that it's a whole community resource, just as you've described. But I think one of the other things, John, that you just mentioned that I wanted to touch on was this ongoing need for investment in workforce partnerships that not only educate workers but support them with wraparound services as they may be needed. And I have had a bill that has bipartisan support for a while to have federal investment in that kind of partnership, because when I've talked with employers, they've said, you know, it's people who are coming back into the workforce after they've been struggling with either a family crisis or a behavioral health problem, or they're in recovery. And as strong an employer as one tries to be, employers shouldn't be the only place where people re-entering the workforce in those situations have the support they need. So trying to find a way to support wraparound services in these partnerships, I think, is really important, and we'll continue to try to do that.
We appreciate that. I think for us, you know, the ability to recruit and retain is one aspect of it, but you know, absenteeism is a big issue for us. You know, so we'll have a great worker who will present, will come to work, be there with us for 3 weeks, terrific worker, and then all of a sudden life happens.
Yeah.
And on Monday, that worker may not be there on Monday, and then you wonder where they are on Tuesday, but then they come back on Wednesday. And so trying to support them through some of these crises, some of these life moments are things that we're interested in doing.
And trying to, you know, it can be as complicated as a major family crisis or illness, or a daycare that closed for some reason, or it can be that the car broke down and they didn't have money to fix the car and get to work. And so that's the kind of thing that we've been trying to think through. How do you have the supports there so that you can keep the workforce stable? Yeah. So Christine, thank you for being here. And thank you for what Exhale is doing. It's really exciting. The UNH partnership is really, really exciting. I want to ask you about your challenges finding sufficient numbers of quality workers to fill positions. We are hearing, and our panels are telling us, it's a constant struggle in the high-tech industry across the country, including in New Hampshire. But many businesses see the potential in our state and choose to locate in New Hampshire. Certainly, Exhale is here, and you've partnered with UNH. How have you worked to attract and train young and aspiring high-tech workers to Exhale?
Well, thank you, Senator. So, if you're in the high-tech world, you absolutely need to be involved with universities. That's where you're going to get all the new ideas and the people who are just really ready to push the technology further. So, being a French company with a small contingency here in the United States itself is a challenge. In France, we're tied into all the universities and have a lot of internships. But when we launched our autonomous vehicle here in the U.S., it became very clear to us that we were going to need to partner with somebody who had the talent, first of all, and who also was interested in the technology. And of course, New Hampshire being on the sea was a perfect fit for us. Back in 2018, we started working with the Center for Coastal and Ocean Mapping and their Joint Hydrographic Center, where we were able to tap into world-class educational resources through Larry Mayer and Val Schmidt. And they're able to expose now their students to this really advanced robotic technology and able to prepare them for jobs in defense and in any kind of ocean mapping, sonar technologies. And so what we do is we also do internships. So we actually have setting up a program right now where an intern from UNH is going to be going to the south of France, not a bad gig, to really get hands-on training with the autonomous and robotic vehicles. We also bring French interns over to the U.S. where they get to stay here for about 18 months. It's a French program, and they get to learn about international business and how to, the cultural differences and everything between us and France, which obviously there are a few. And this has really strengthened our company, brought in fresh perspectives, and we really couldn't have done it without just this partnership with UNH. And New Hampshire's just an amazing place to do business, and the people here have a lot of grit. So I think that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I always say we settled a state made of granite, so we're a pretty strong and hardy bunch, and it's a little cold sometimes, too. Well, thank you for that. And Ed, I wanted to turn to you now. I have a specific question for you, but I also will invite you to just talk generally about what the SBDC does, if you would like to. But the specific question is, just from your experience with the Small Business Development Center, what are some successful ways that you've seen businesses help their current employees develop the skills they need to meet the next technology that the business is doing, or just skill up generally, including through education partnerships?
All right, thank you, Senator. And yeah, I think it's, I should share what we do. So the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, the number one thing we do is offer one-on-one, personalized, confidential business advice to small businesses categorized by the SBA as 500 or less employees. Yeah. But I'd have to say that our sweet spot is really, I'd say, solopreneurs, and then the next sweet spot might be maybe businesses with employees of, say, 20 to maybe 100 or so employees. So we really do have that broad gap. But the knowledge that comes to the SBDC comes from the diversity of clients that we service and how many we service. We have 10 business advisors, each working with 200 or so businesses here in the state of New Hampshire. So we have all of these questions coming from thousands of small businesses. At any given time, maybe each advisor has 20 or 30 active activities going, or advising sessions going on in a given week with small businesses. But I'm trying to get back to your question now.
That's all right.
So specifically, what we see, we're in a lot of high growth situations. So when it comes to educating and training the workforce, I bumped into one of my clients here today who's in the audience, and he said, we're right on the edge of getting this contract. We're going to move into that 45,000 square foot facility, and we need to employ another close to 50 employees should we get this contract. And you could just hear, excited about the contract, but trepidation about how to employ and train those employees. So as it relates to the types of clients that we deal with, a lot of times it's these business owners who have a workforce that are currently doing some activity. The owners or management's very heavily involved in the growth of the business, and they're seeing an evolution of people who maybe were working on the shop floor, taking on roles in operations or other capacities. So I'd have to say that on-the-job training is probably the biggest for educating and training the employees. But second to that, programmatically, which you talked a little bit about collaboration in the previous panel, at the SBDC, we know of all these state organizations, such as Tony at the MEP mentioned training programs that they have. UNH has professional development programs that are little one-bite programs of how to create a workforce culture or how to move into a management role. So the university system, UNH, actually has programs where you can send somebody who may not have management skills to take a professional development course specifically on that. And then in addition to that, I know that somebody here, again in the audience today, is from the BEA's Apex Accelerator Program, all these acronyms. Previously PTAC, which was the Professional Technical Assistance, Procurement Technical Assistance for Government Contracts specifically. I've had more than one of my small business clients learn about, educate themselves on how to get government contracts by working with what was previously PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance, which is now Apex Accelerator. So in any case, I'd say at the SBDC, we have the ability to make those connections to resources that exist in the state of New Hampshire. So.
That's excellent. And I assume, Christine talked about it with Exhale, but the education partnerships have been pretty numerous and organic at times in New Hampshire. Do you see your clients finding ways to partner up with educators?
Definitely, and we work very closely, being part of UNH as an outreach program. There's a department at UNH, and maybe you worked with them, UNH Innovation. It's that group who is, their specific charter is to assist businesses with how to collaborate with the university.
Yeah.
So UNH Innovation is a department within the university system of New Hampshire, specifically there to help you figure out how to make connections with the resources that they have available there.
Okay. Well, thank you. This has been very helpful. I have some general questions that I'll open up to the whole group, and we can kind of take it from there. One of them is really about the unique barriers that women may face when we're talking about technology and manufacturing jobs in particular. How can we ensure that opportunities in STEM and manufacturing are extended to everybody, women or other marginalized groups who just may not have access to the same kind of baseline opportunities? Anybody? Yeah,
I'd love
Jen?
to
Yes,
start on this one,
okay.
Senator. We at Army, again, in close collaboration with our community college system of New Hampshire and university partners and with public schools across the state, had the opportunity to pilot recently a certification program for biofabrication technicians. Our first cohort was actually all women. We didn't expect that. We didn't recruit specifically that way. What we saw, though, was that in our outreach, when we really opened the doors and invited people to see themselves in the future of this industry, there was really an untapped cohort of people ready to leap forward and spring in and get involved. We are now launching a Department of Labor certified registered apprenticeship program for biofabrication technicians. And again, we are seeing incredible interest from community stakeholders that have not been traditionally well represented in biofabrication careers or in the technical careers that are related to that, engineering, robotics, automation, biochemistry. But we're seeing that there's a hunger and a desire. And so we think it's exceedingly important to recruit and really source that talent in a way that enables people to see themselves in that future. And then to the deeply insightful comments so many of my colleagues on the panel here have said today, to be able to provide and really deliver on the wraparound supports necessary to sustain the achievement of that person's dream. And that does mean housing, that does mean childcare, that does mean really the mentorship necessary to not only help that person see that they can enter this field, but see that they can succeed in that field long term.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
So I would just add that after COVID, there was an estimated 2 million American women who are not able to return to the workforce because either it's unaffordable or they can't access that. That is a huge barrier. We are losing a whole group of trained, qualified people that we desperately need in government and the private sector to be able to do the work that needs to be done. So we have a system that is crashing. The child care system, just the model that we've been operating on forever, doesn't work anymore. Someone else said that in the last panel. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. It doesn't work. We need to change what we are doing. We need different approaches to do that. If we don't solve this child care problem, we're going to continue to have a large portion of very well-trained, very qualified people who cannot return to work. And it's an equity issue as well. If you have a child and you're out for 12 years by the time the child doesn't need child care any longer, age 13, during that entire time, that woman is missing out where her colleagues continue to advance in their career. That woman cannot do that. She is left behind. Her ability to retire and make income and do the things that the rest of us enjoy, she is left behind in that. That's incredibly unfair. But more importantly as well, it's also a direct impact on our businesses and our ability to thrive in this country.
Well said.
Yeah, I'd just
John,
add,
and then, yeah.
from our perspective, flexible work schedules. So we experiment with 4-day work week, part-time schedules, trying to work around. We are hopefully soon, we'll be running a full third shift, 24/7, related. But for our second shift now, we're looking at ways that we could improve the number of women who are looking for work but just are struggling around flexible work hours. I think the other piece of this is around health insurance and health benefits too,
Yeah.
and being able to offer competitive package around health insurance, and that's something that we're certainly struggling with. We would love to offer a more generous benefit package than we offer today, and I think if we get to that place in the future where health insurance becomes much more widely and universally accepted, I think we'll be in a better place as an employer.
Okay. Thank you, Ed, and then Christine.
Sure. Related to, I think Rebecca mentioned in the previous panel, needing more engineers, and there's a statistically known disproportionate rate of women college graduates to women employed in tech jobs. So I think the number is like 56% of all college students are women, and then the women that are employed in the tech sector, it's below 25%. So that's certainly a real disproportionate rate. I teach as an adjunct instructor at the business school at UNH. I can look out of my classroom and see that that ratio of women in the classroom is true. And once again at the SBDC, a lot of collaborative partnerships. Many of you may know about the New Hampshire Tech Alliance. That's a partner organization to the SBDC, and they actually have a program called Tech Women, Tech Girls, which is a cohort of women in the technology sector who can get together and discuss how to collaborate within their specific industries. So I'd say if you're looking to employ women in the tech sector, you should probably look into the New Hampshire Tech Alliance and maybe tap into that as a resource as well.
Christine.
So over the past 10 years, we've certainly seen many, many women entering STEM-type educational paths. And yes, they do come into the workforce, but what I've seen firsthand is the burnout that women face, because while the guys are off playing golf, and I'm not trying to generalize, but the women are sitting home and they're preparing for tomorrow, and they're preparing and they're studying and they're trying to learn more so they can look smart. And I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a change in upper management and coaching. Mentorship is fabulous, but coaching is another whole aspect that's not being tapped, and having a coaching culture where you take and you ask that person what their dreams are, and then you help them to find their own solutions and their own pathways through. Also build their self-confidence and realize that just doing their job is enough, just like it is for the guys. And research shows that a woman won't apply for a job if she can't tick every box, where a man will be like, I'll figure it out. If we could instill that in women in education, to realize that go for it, try it, and you're going to learn just like you did in school.
Well said. In my line of work, we see many fewer women running for office because they think they don't have enough experience yet. And sorry to the men in the room, men do not seem to be bothered by the same general concern. I'm overstating some, but it is a real issue about the way women have been socialized in many ways to think that they have to be able to check every box, be perfectly prepared for every single thing. And obviously, in a business culture, or really in any line of work, it's the ability to learn and interact and problem solve that is really what's key. Broadening this a little bit, but how can we increase awareness about workforce development opportunities so that more people can take full advantage of them? More people, more businesses, and again, anybody who wants to comment, please do.
I'll jump in. I feel like I'm making announcements for all these state organizations.
That's good. That's good.
So the BEA, once again, they have an Office of Workforce Opportunity. And I didn't know of all these organizations before I started at the SBDC about 3 years ago. But I've actually had clients who have successfully taken advantage of these state entities, and they truly exist. They're funded. They exist. They actually have the ability to help small businesses. So I'd say, specifically related to workforce development, check out the BEA Office of Workforce Opportunity. And then it sounds pretty simple, but the New Hampshire Office of Employment Security. I had a small business who he was getting to a point, about a 12-employee company in Brentwood, New Hampshire. He's getting to a point where he was spending so much on marketing with outside agencies, he said, I think I have the budget for a marketing director. He contacted Employment Securities. They had a veteran who was seeking employment, who was skilled in what he needed, and he actually hired a marketing director through the New Hampshire Office of Employment Securities. So those state organizations exist for a reason, and if you can find your way to the point of contact at these organizations, I'd highly recommend that you try that as an area for finding employees.
I'd love to follow up on that as well. And yes, I think it's so deeply important to understand the infrastructure and the partners that already exist. And I would just add that it's really important, I think, to think of outside the box on collaborators that might not immediately come to mind, but that may be operating in a very aligned space. So, for instance, the Center for New Americans within SNHU, Apprenticeship New Hampshire, part of the Community College System of New Hampshire, the YMCA. We developed a patch with Girl Scouts of the White Mountains, right, and are trying to take that nationally. And you might think, okay, Girl Scouts, that's not the workforce we need right now. But in terms of a time horizon, since Army started, those third graders that were working on that patch are now sophomores in high school thinking about what they want to do. And they'll be in the workforce in a couple of years. And so I think thinking outside the box and thinking in both a near-term and a long-term time horizon really matters to the future of industries in our state, too.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I would just add that I think, in some ways, too, this is a political discussion and a priority. And so, for sure, the state, and I'd encourage all of the state legislature and local government leaders to continue to partner and work with local businesses. And, for sure, some of the requirements that and the challenges we had in the first round of Invest NH and the Main Street Fund and some of the others were one around scale. And I understand that, projects in Manchester, projects in Nashua, projects elsewhere get a lot of attention because they do help a lot of people. But I think we're here to represent the North Country a bit, and just remember that there's another part of the state that's also got its own challenges, and we'd love to be able to, like I said, get a second bite of that apple and see if there isn't a round 2 or round 3 on some of this going forward.
And one of the things I always try to do is talk about the ripple effect of investing in a place. And up in the North Country, 90 employees is a lot in a business. I mean, it's a lot in a lot of New Hampshire businesses, frankly, but in the North Country, that ripple effect is huge. And we just have to kind of remember what the impact is here and think about scale, I think, sometimes in those terms. Did you want to say something, Sean?
I'll just add one thing. This doesn't require any level of government at all, doesn't require any outside organization. Every one of us who's a manager has the opportunity to develop women in our workforce, to give them that courage, as Christine indicated, and mentor them and invest in them so they can move ahead. All of us can do that. It doesn't require any law, doesn't require anything else. We're doing that in the city that I work in. I know some of you are doing that, and we can all do that. We can do that today and invest those people and train them and tell them, you can do this. I'm going to give you an opportunity to try this. You have the ability to get this done. You're better than you think that you are.
Well said, thank you. This is reminding me, too, of an earlier comment that one of you made about it was you, Sean, when women are out of the workforce during those child-raising years, that 10 to 12 years, let's say, that they don't have the same opportunity to get Social Security benefits or to earn retirement. It puts them at an economic disadvantage. For those of you who are running small businesses and don't participate in a pension plan, for instance, we have changed the federal law to make it much easier for small businesses to join together and offer things like pension plans to folks, which is often really important for part-time workers who are often women or people coming in and out of the workforce. It's also a good way to keep employees in a small business. They might be looking to a larger business if they're looking at benefits that are more standard in larger businesses. So that's a little bit of just if you want to find out about something called Secure Act 2.0, that is something that should make it easier for more of our businesses to offer those kind of critical benefits. Last question to the general group. Are there lessons in building a stronger technology and manufacturing workforce that can be applied to other fields? We've talked about it a little bit, but just any last thoughts about as we go after this critical kind of, it isn't an entirely new workforce, but we're obviously going to need more and more of this workforce. What are the general lessons about developing workforce?
I'll jump in. So I'd say, we have to be aware of the generation that we're dealing with right now that's graduating from college or even just graduating from high school. So Generation Z, I was actually part of a focus group. It was a grant funded through the VEA. There was a grant that allowed us to focus on workforce attraction and retention. And a lot of the survey data that we found was that this next generation of workers is not necessarily putting the wage as their top priority. They want to be part of something, and they want to be part of a mission. As you had mentioned, they want to be recognized as contributing value, and they want to see growth opportunities. So they want to see a path to growth. They want to be a part of something, and wage isn't really the number one thing that this next generation is talking about. They're very mission driven, and I'd say that to employers, regardless of your size, what we had found was that you want to involve that type of language in your job postings. So don't just say X dollar, X salary, X number, dollar per hour, but put into your job postings things about the growth opportunity, the mission of the company, and those types of things. So make sure that you're aware that that's what's going to attract this next generation of employee.
Well said.
I think for us, slightly different and thinking about it in a different way, we're struggling now with this if there aren't going to be programs, excuse me, to continue to support workforce housing, affordable housing, or some of the other things that we're talking about on this panel. We are going to turn increasingly to having to conduct the analysis about some of the other topics that were discussed in the first hour around things like robotics.
Yeah.
And this interesting convergence between hiring a human workforce versus investing in robots, and some of those other automation efforts that are going to make us a more efficient operation that don't require a lot of the other expenses and some of the other management time with a human workforce. And so we're at an interesting point right now. We want to support our local community. We want to support our workforce. We want to continue to support the region. But unless there's going to be opportunities for us to look at ways to invest in the workforce, we might have to think about other strategies.
Well, and I appreciate that very much, and it's a good message generally, but it's important. There is growing bipartisan support for additional investment, for instance, in the LIHTC, which stands for Low Income Housing Tax Credit program, which is the way most low and moderate income housing has been built in the United States in recent decades, is through these tax credits. But we haven't kept up funding those tax credits at the level that the demand requires. So there is increased recognition, getting us to a point. The challenge in federal investment is always distinguishing between investments and expenses. You obviously want to keep expenses low, but investments can really have a huge payoff, and certainly in housing, that's true. And we need to continue to focus on ways here in New Hampshire and locally, and this is a little bit of a shout out because I know I'm looking at a room that's got to include some planning board members or some select persons or the like. What developers tell us about building housing in New Hampshire is that our local processes can be so varied and take such a long time. It isn't that people don't want transparency and oversight, but it takes a long time because we have an awful lot of volunteer boards and an awful lot of stretched out process. And so that adds to the expense. And so just to the degree people are involved in their local government and want to think creatively about how to keep that local control and oversight and transparency, but speed things up, that's an important aspect. And I know the state is working at trying to find some different models of doing this. But again, that's something that all of us as citizens of New Hampshire can drive forward, which is let's do this in a way that makes sense for our communities but builds that critical housing. Because it's not just workforce needs. I mean, I would expect that everybody has a story to tell about, a couple who are empty nesters who want to downsize, but they can't find a place to downsize to. Those are the real life issues that we're dealing with. So I'm hoping that we can all take a crack at that too. Anything else anybody wants to add before we close up?
I'd love to add just one, Senator, and that is that I think we've heard said a number of different ways today that we can't leave talent on the table, and I think that's one piece that we know in the manufacturing and in the biotech space, and in the spaces represented here that can translate to other industries. We also know that in order to lead, in order for New Hampshire to lead, in order for ultimately the U.S. to lead, and especially some of these new industry spaces, we not only can't leave talent on the table, but we must act together to achieve that. In the biofabrication space, we know that there are other nations, including U.S. adversaries, who are pouring funding and talent into these spaces. We must act together and act now. It might not seem intuitive, but actually in the biofabrication space, we spend a lot of time thinking about what the first panel was talking about. We spend a lot of time thinking about semiconductors, because if the technologies in our space are developed here, but we don't act fast enough to help those startups succeed, to develop U.S. lines of business here, to grow the workforce, that intellectual property will ultimately move out of the U.S., and those technologies won't be manufactured here. We won't be able to capture those good jobs with those family-sustaining wages. And to do that, I think it takes all of us up here, it takes everyone in this room, it really takes our state at a community, local, and state level. And thank you, Senator, for bringing the national level to put attention on this. But I truly believe it takes all of us, and we must act with speed if we want to be in the lead.
Well, I appreciate that, and I would be remiss if I didn't also say that one of the things that is on people's minds at the federal level right now is making sure that we restore full deductibility for research and development expenses for business. Something I'm working on right now. There's bipartisan support for it, like everything in Washington right now. Figuring out the path forward is going to take a little bit of time. But I went on this bipartisan trip to China in October, and one of the things that I was reminded of is that the Chinese government invests 20 times as much as we do in research and development tax credits in the first year, right? Not to mention some of the other things we did. We also were very clear with the Chinese government that we expect reciprocal fairness in terms of treatment of our businesses that invest in China if they want our businesses to continue to invest in China. So we are making sure that we are doing what we need to do to keep investment here, but I think there's a growing recognition about what our adversaries are doing. And the last thing I will say is we also tried to make clear, as I know Secretary Raimondo has in her visits to the Chinese government, that we are not going to negotiate about national security. So where that technology comes into play for critical national security assets, we're going to work really hard to protect them here. But the greater point you're making, which is there's an awful lot of technological developments and scientific advances that will go where the investment is. And we want to make sure that investment is here. So I thank you for making that point. I got the 5-minute high sign from my crack team in the back of the room, but I just want to thank you all for giving me your time, for traveling here today. I know how busy you are. I know how much is on your plate. I'm really, really grateful for everything you all are doing. I'm really grateful again to all of you who came this morning for the leadership you provide in New Hampshire and in the region. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you the New Hampshire way, which is working together. Thanks.